Now, I'm not an author. I've written one book, nobody has read it. It's not like this. I'm also not a lawyer. So what I talk about will be much simpler. And hopefully it's going to be interesting to you as well. So I'm none of those things. I'm neither an author nor a lawyer, but I do have two things. I do have like something simple that you can think about after you leave here, and I have a nice story about a David and Goliath type of situation. So my goal with this talk is to inform you about digital sovereignty. Now, you've been informed about that all evening, but I come from this researchy background, so I have sources. So when you get these slides, if you want to look stuff up afterwards, you can read more about it, and also how it relates to open source. Now, I'm a huge proponent of open source, as is Pluto and everybody else, besides you, Andrea. Okay. So my goal of this talk is to inform you about open source and how it can contribute to digital sovereignty. Who am I and why should you listen to me? Well, I honestly don't know why you should listen to me besides the fact that I stand here in front of you. But if you give me, I don't know, like what, 20 minutes or something, then I hope you learn at least something new. I'm a senior cloud architect at Elasticsearch. I should stand like this, like it's some superhero type of thing. What we do is we offer fully managed Kubernetes platforms on EU clouds. For instance, the European cloud, Cloud. I've been working in cloud computing since 2008. I have a PhD in computer science, mainly related to clouds. And I have a background as a software developer, DevOps engineer, doing distributed systems, etc. Please connect with me on LinkedIn. I'd love to keep in touch. I talk about all kinds of techie stuff, but also compassionate leadership. Right, so digital sovereignty. I know we've had several sort of definitions for this evening. I don't need to be careful with my words. So I pulled out a statistic that says that 92% of all Western Hemisphere data is hosted on US-owned cloud servers, or US-owned servers at least. 92%. That's a lot. Now, that number is higher than what we heard before, and I was like, oh my God, are my stats wrong? But no, it says Western, right? So it also includes the US. So then the number with 80% that we heard before, that can still be true.
I thought of it because it was 10 minutes later.
Yeah, you know, maybe. Yeah, exactly. So many people have uploaded to YouTube, it's increased now. We also heard that the US has privacy invasive legislation that is extraterrestrial. What does that mean? Well, it applies to data that is on US-owned servers, regardless of where they happen to be in the world. And that's by design. You can read these sources. You can tell by the domain names that I put in there that it's not, you know, some weird blog from some conspiracy theorist. This is actually from the NSA, the Congress, well, and then the NSA again. And at least to me, I like these simple definitions, right? To me, digital sovereignty is about taking responsibility for our data again. So we used to be very responsible with our data because data was, you know, the thing that you had in your server room. But then we moved to the cloud, and then we stopped being responsible. Well, I think it's time to be responsible again. I found this figure. So there's a lot of economic interest to have cloud services. So this is a huge trend in society right now. We want to use the cloud, right? So this is where we put our data. You see this is a projection. This was done in 2019. They projected it 7 years ahead of time, you know, back when they thought about stuff. That probably changed due to the last year's, you know, situation with all kinds of stuff going on. 2019, they had no idea about the pandemic even, right? So lots of stuff has changed since then, but I mean, we still see this huge push. We want to use cloud services. That's obvious, but we need to do so in a responsible way, right? We might even be forced to do this in a responsible way. So there's this NIS2 directive. I'm sure we can get a much smarter definition of it than what I can produce, but it basically makes it kind of illegal to not take cybersecurity seriously. So that's great for cybersecurity, but it also means we really need to step up our game. So you can't ignore cybersecurity. You need to build on secure systems. You need to build secure systems yourself. Now, how do you do that? I say that digital sovereignty is enabled by open source. What do I mean by enabled by? Because, I mean, before this evening, I mean, now we've heard great arguments, but before this evening, you hear all kinds of stuff like, so digital sovereignty is easy then, right? Or, you know, just use servers in the Swedish or EU regions of the major clouds. Now, I hope nobody here thinks that, but maybe somebody does. It's obviously not going to be enough. So we have the Integritetsskyddsmyndigheten. I don't even know what that is in English, but I mean, that's the Swedish Data Protection Authority. That's not enough, right? So the general director there just recently had a very nice podcast interview. That's what the link points to, if you want to listen to her. She's very smart. She also says clearly they also have to be owned by a company that is not a subsidiary of a company that is, under these extraterrestrial legislations from third countries, which means basically outside of the EU or European Economic Area. So that kind of means, right, no AWS, no Azure, no Google Cloud. And many people go like, well. And then they will say, so once their initial fear reaction is over, they will go, no, but look, supplementary measures, I read something about that, or standard contractual clauses, something. I mean, they have these things that they want to really cling on to. I'm sorry, your provider will not break the law for you, all right? So if by law they have to give out data, they will. That's even in standard contractual clauses. You can go read clause 15 right now. You can click on that link. Once you can click on links, you get the slides afterwards. It's clearly stated. They will, of course, abide by the law that they are under. Duh. I hope that's not a surprise to anyone in here. So, okay, but what does supplementary measure mean? So can't I somehow use these services anyways? I mean, surely there must be a way, right? Well, European Data Protection Board, they have recommendations. You can click on that link as well. Basically, you have to protect your data from your provider in that case. Essentially, you need to encrypt data off cloud and then never make the key available to that cloud provider. That's ridiculous, because that turns the provider into a fancy file server, right? Because if they're supposed to host your database, they need to be able to actually read the contents of the database. How else is that database going to answer any questions? So it's just going to be a big fancy file server. And then what's the point? Honestly. Okay, but Swedish or EU owned servers then? Yes! Now we're actually getting somewhere. Again, European cloud. But so the thing is, though, just the server, as in the physical machine, that's not very pleasant to use. I mean, honestly, everybody in here uses infrastructure as a service, right? So you very reasonably expect a higher level of service these days. You don't want to deal with a physical server. That's what you have Clura for, right? I mean, that's what you have somebody else to deal with all the physical stuff so that you can actually just say, oh, well, you know, I want to use automation, I want to use failover, I want to pay as I use resources. I don't want to own a physical server because, well, that's just a lot of work that does not really make my company unique. Okay. So I claim that open source is the key to all this. And this is where the David and Goliath story comes in. Because the funny thing is that it's kind of like this guy gave that guy that sling. So Clura is great. They do infrastructure as a service. From their About page, they offer fully automated digital infrastructure services, and they use infrastructure technology built on open source. Cool. That open source happens to be called OpenStack. I mean, most people here have used that, or at least familiar with it in some way. It was originally developed by NASA and Rackspace, this provider that actually was in exactly this space, just in the US. And this is obviously much more convenient and modern than a physical server co-location, which is totally still a thing. I mean, you can still buy physical servers, you put them somewhere, and then it's somebody else's problem to make sure they have power and network cables that don't fall out. Yes.
How much did you pay?
It's actually only the About page, and it's honestly, guys, it's not a whole lot more than that. Sorry, marketing team. But so it's much more convenient and modern than just placing a physical server somewhere, obviously. So it's super nice that you're able to say, I want to have this many virtual machines, and yeah. I mean, and connect them with virtual networks and do virtual everything, and then I just pay for whatever I used. That's really convenient. But now I'm going to stop making just ads for them. I need to also talk about Kubernetes and spread the good word about Kubernetes. So what is Kubernetes? It's an open source container orchestration system, and it's becoming the de facto standard for automating software deployment, scaling, and management. And that was originally developed by Google. Why did Google do that? Was it because they're just, kind? No, they wanted to steal whatever market advantage Amazon had, so they wanted to level the playing field so it would be easier to migrate your, workload away from Amazon and onto Google Cloud. But the fact is, of course, that it's also easier to migrate away from Google Cloud as well as Amazon to something else, to anywhere else where you have Kubernetes running. Yeah, I'm not going to say their name again. Your favorite Linux-based software is basically guaranteed at this point to have an official way to deploy on Kubernetes. It's super easy to figure out how to deploy databases on there. It's super easy to figure out whatever it is you have, if it runs on a server and it's Linux-based, it's easy to figure out how to run it on Kubernetes because it's really becoming the de facto standard language of the cloud. Now, what exactly do we do, and why should anyone care? Well, the thing is, we want to raise the level of abstraction. We understand that people don't necessarily want to deal with virtual machines. Maybe they want to have, somebody else take care of my Kubernetes platform, right? So Kubernetes itself is great. It's like this base layer of a platform, but it's not a platform itself. So you need to actually have a logging system, monitoring system. You need somewhere to store these containers. You need, vulnerability scanning. You need tons of security stuff, because otherwise people like him are going to freak out and write more books and give Russians more ideas. You don't want that. I mean, stop writing books. Thanks for the book. So what we do is that on top of infrastructure, we create Kubernetes clusters and we manage those as a service, and then you just get that as a service. And if you're worried about data centers being above ground and getting bombed, yeah, I get it. You had pictures of Swedish data centers. If you want, we can, automatically do your backups of all your important data and then ship it away to, say, Klura's, Frankfurt region. So that at least then they have to bomb a NATO country. Maybe they don't dare do that, so at least your backups are safe. You might not be, but your backups are. No, so on top of infrastructure services, we put a Kubernetes platform. It consists of all kinds of stuff you probably don't want to manage yourself, but it builds this nice cohesive whole. And then you put an application on top of it, and you don't have to deal with updating any of this stuff or maintaining it. We just do it. So that's what we do. So together, Klura and Elastis make digital sovereignty possible. Open source is the thing that enables us to do it. The beautiful irony is that we got it from, Rackspace and Google. So we got it from the Goliaths themselves. So that's the beautiful irony of it all. Thank you.